It's time for a key security feature that we implement on our Catalyst switches. It's port security. Why we love this is it can guard against so many different types of attacks. What we're going to do is we're going to lock down the port by MAC address. This is going to enable us to prevent rogue devices from attempting to get on our network and cause chaos. By the way, it's also going to protect us from MAC flooding attacks and things of that nature. So for you and I to explore this feature together, I've fired up Cisco Viral. Why? Viral? Well, because it does such a great job of layer 2 switch emulation, exactly what we want to practice with here. By the way, that's in addition to ASA emulation and CRS 1000 emulation and a whole bunch of other awesome images from Cisco. But all right, here we are at switch 1, connected with Gigabit Ethernet 0/1 to R1's Gig 0/1. And the configuration of port security is done on the switch in interface configuration mode, or of course, interface range configuration mode. So let's explore it. We're going to go to the Gigabit 0/1 interface. And first of all, I better kind of set this up as we would a standard access port, for instance. So I'll do switch port, mode, access, switch port access VLAN 100. Great. Now we're ready to see our switch port security configuration. So we say switch port security, and let's do a question mark. First of all, how we enable the feature, and it's actually pretty easy to forget to enable it, is to say switch port security carriage return. But we don't want to do that yet. You see, we want to set the particular parameters around port security. The first thing that I'm going to demonstrate would be for us to dynamically learn the MAC address that is connected to this particular port and to set a maximum number of MAC addresses. A very realistic scenario is that outside of this port, you have a Cisco IP phone and you have it's some type of PC. So what we would do is we would come in and say switch port security maximum, and we'd say 2 MAC addresses are going to be permitted on this port. That's it. All right, cool. Now, how are we going to learn those MAC addresses? Well, if we turn on the feature right now, remember, we haven't enabled it. We're just setting the parameters. How we enable port security is to say switch port security. So now we've actually enabled the feature and set a maximum number of MAC addresses. I'll end the configuration and we'll want to verify what we've configured. My favorite way for verification here is to do show port security interface and specify the interface that we have configured. So it's enabled port security for that particular interface, and notice the violation mode is shut down. The violation modes that you have available to you are protect, restrict, and shutdown. Now, my dear friend and colleague Keith Barker taught me a great way to remember these 3 and what they do, and I've never forgotten it since. He says, first, Anthony, put them in alphabetical order. Then remember that that is going to be from the least severe action to the most severe action. Shutdown is the most severe violation mode that you can have. If an offending MAC address shows up, in our case, if that means a third MAC address shows up. Notice we configured a max of 2 and we have 1 address learned on that interface now. So if a third MAC address shows up, we shut down the port. The device shuts down the port itself, of course. That's an error disabled state. I'll demonstrate that in a moment. And we are notified. Sure, there's going to be status messages and things that notify us of a violation. Restrict stops just the bad MAC address from communicating, but does not shut down the port. Of course, we're notified of a restriction. Protect, Cisco tells us never to use. Not really sure why they gave us the protect mode if they didn't want us to use it. It will stop a bad MAC address from communicating, but it does no incrementing of the counters that there's been a violation. Weird. I mean, obviously, we would want to know there's been a violation. So that mode is just silly. Now, while I say that, Don't be surprised in the lab exam environment if you're asked to configure protect mode. Because remember, they're not being hardcore about what you would do in production. It is an academic test, so you could very well be asked to configure the mode that Cisco begs you never to use. So this configuration that we have right here probably isn't impressing you all that much. Think about it. All we've done is restricted the number of MAC addresses that can be on this particular port. I mean, if we want some real, intense security, obviously we would take the MAC address that's being learned on the port and we would lock it down to that specific MAC address. So I've removed the port security configuration that we did initially. Let's just verify that with our show run interface. And yes, we can see the port security is gone. And now let's go in and let's try this, not dynamic learning, let's try static learning. So it's switch port, port security, MAC address this time, and we'll paste in the MAC address that we know is to be permitted on that particular interface. Now, don't forget to turn on the feature. So I'll say switch port, port security. It's fairly easy to forget to do that after setting your parameters. Watch out for that. So now we'll end our configuration and we'll do our show port security for interface gigabit 0/1. Notice this time we are locking it down to just the default one MAC address. And we have configured that MAC address. This is a static situation. Wow. So now we're playing with some real intense security. Let's see a violation. So we go over to R1, and on R1 we're going to go into the interface gigabit 0/1, and we are literally going to change the MAC address. We're going to say, obviously we're not changing the burned in address, but we're changing the MAC address in a software perspective, and this should trigger our violation. So our MAC address is 1212.3333.4444, and we've set a violating MAC address. Let me make sure that MAC address is done correctly. There we go. It's in the correct format. So now when we end this configuration and we go back over to our switch, as soon as communications occur between R1 and switch 1, I believe we're going to see a big time violation. And in the lab exam, you certainly wouldn't want to wait. You'd want to verify this very quickly. So one way you could do that would be to bounce the R1 interface. But sure enough, we see what's occurred here. There's been a port security violation error detected on 0/1, and 0/1 went into the error disabled state. We even see the MAC address that caused this whole problem reported to us. So this is certainly more representative of how we might want to utilize this feature. And now the question becomes, how would you recover from that error disabled state? Well, you'd go and remove that offending rogue system from your network. In our case, that was removing the software MAC address that we put on the R1 device. On R2, once you've got that offending machine removed, on switch 1, what you would do is you would go over and obviously you would bounce the interface. That's the easiest way to do it. Just shut and no shut the error disabled interface. It's going to learn the correct MAC now, and it's going to leave its error disabled status. Remember, there's the error disable recovery feature, however, where you can have the Catalyst switch on an interval that you specify automatically try and recover those error disabled interfaces. So that's something to consider as well. But to wrap up this particular nugget on port security, I want to show you yet another powerful way we can implement this feature. It's my favorite way, and it's got such a cool name. So we first looked at dynamically learning MAC addresses and of course restricting that to a certain number. Then we looked at the much more intense static configuration of the MAC addresses. But I like this method. It's called sticky learning. What a great way to go. Watch this. So I'm going to go into the interface and I'm going to say switch port, port security, MAC address, and we're going to do context sensitive help. And instead of specifying the 48-bit MAC, I'm going to simply say sticky. What a hilarious term, right? So what's going to happen here? Well, first of all, let me turn on the feature. You can't forget to do that. Switch port, port security, carriage return. And it says, wait a minute, Gigabit Ethernet 0/1 is a dynamic port. Ah, okay. To get ready for this demonstration, I defaulted the interface. So we lost our switch port mode access command and switch port access VLAN 100, for example. Okay, great. Now we will rerun our commands, and that's switch port, port security MAC address sticky, and then of course switch port, port security. So now it took. Let's verify that, of course, with a show run interface Gigabit 0/1. There we go. We have the port security turned on and the MAC address sticky turned on. What happens now is we verify, like maybe physically, we go out there and we look, okay, the correct machine is plugged in. That's going to be dynamically learned, but it's going to be written, the MAC address, as a static entry in the running configuration. Let me rerun this command and see if it took yet. No, it hasn't taken yet. Let me force things along by going to this interface on the router and shutting it, and then no shutting it. That should kick in communications over the port, of course, and that should cause the switch to dynamically learn the MAC address. And because we said it should be sticky, it writes that as a static entry into the running configuration. How cool. So it saves us a step of acquiring the MAC address of our host and putting it in statically. It does it for us. All we have to remember to do, of course, is once the sticky entries are in there, we have to save the running configuration. And of course, in the lab exam, we're obsessively saving configurations all the time. Save, 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 save. Because, of course, if you were to submit your lab for grading with things not saved, you would fail. So, here we have the sticky learning, the third way in which we can configure the port security feature, and it's such a cool way. Now, the last thing that I better show you, because it just struck me that we never did manipulate this, was the violation mode, and that's, of course, easy to set. So you would go in and you would say switch port, port security. If you do your context-sensitive help, you see there is the violation keyword, and that's where we can set the protect, the restrict, or the shutdown mode of operation. We saw and demonstrated a static configuration, a dynamic configuration. We actually did the dynamic first, where we're just locking it down by the number of MAC addresses. We did a nice strict static config, and then we did a nice kind of variation of the two, sticky. It's dynamically learned but written as a static entry when we do the sticky learning. We remember there is the protect mode of operation, the restrict mode of operation, and the shutdown mode of operation. And we remember protect, Cisco asks us not to use because of the fact it is not alerting us that there has been a port security violation. I sure hope this nugget was informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.